Hello, welcome and thank you for checking out the Courageous Nerd YouTube channel. We've got another Stargirl interview coming up with Jake Austin Walker, who you may know better as Henry King Jr. If you enjoyed this interview or any more on the channel, please be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with Courageous Nerd content.
Well, first of all, the first thing I've got here is, well, welcome, and thank you for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Of course. I'm sorry it was such a conundrum on my end.
Yeah. But, so how has your experience been of living in this pandemic?
It's been an adjustment, that's for sure. I think we all kind of expected 2020 to go a little differently. But it hasn't been the worst. I mean, it's honestly been very good for me, like for my mental state, just to be very introspective and have time with myself. And I mean, I know, the social climate and everything in the world, there's a lot that's being figured out right now and stuff. But I personally can't complain about the year myself. It's been a really good year for me to take some time with myself and just relax and as much as you can and just kind of be hopeful for the future. That's been basically the process for me during all this.
Right, and to kind of go on a different tack here, so you're both an actor and a musician, and for anyone who doesn't know, when did you start kind of pursuing creative fields?
Yeah, I was, it was funny because the whole reason I fell into acting is because I went to this talent search thing in Florida, Orlando, Florida, yeah. And I went there to sing. I didn't go there for acting. I was like completely trying to do the singing thing. And I went there for singing, and it was my first time. I'm from a really small town and stuff, so it was my first time being around something that was even remotely, like people in suits, and you'd walk into a room, there's like 20 people in there just staring at you. Like I'd never done anything like that before. So when I went to sing, I just completely choked up. I couldn't even get a word out. And then they're like, look, don't worry. We really like your look. You don't have to worry about singing. Take this thing. It's called a monologue. They're like, memorize this monologue as best as you can, and then in about 10 to 15 minutes, we're gonna have you come back in. And if you want, could you read it for us? And I was like, yeah, sure, I guess. And for some reason, doing that didn't scare me at all. That felt completely normal. So the catalyst for both careers essentially happened at that talent search thing, and that's basically kind of what set it off from there, and then I just kind of followed whichever path seemed to make the smartest choice at the time, like if I was getting roles, then I'd normally follow the acting path, and whenever acting was a little slow, I'd kind of head down the music. I believe they both can live in harmony, so I never try to steer too far away from either of them, because I definitely think they can be unanimous in execution. And I love them both deeply, but yeah, that's kind of where it all started, funny enough.
Right, and on the music side of your career, you recently released a single titled Not Okay, I believe, and how different is your process for developing music compared to preparing to play an acting role?
Well, what's great about music is the complete and utter freedom you have. I mean, when you're creating your music, it's completely up to you. You're the leader. You get to control it. When it comes to a character, depending on your status as an actor, you get more leadway. Obviously, if you're like Robert Pattinson or something, the director and everybody they're talking to you to see what you want to do with the character. But when you're still kind of like making a name for yourself, you kind of have to work your character within the restraints of other people's opinions on how this character would be. And if you're lucky, like I was, you would have a great showrunner like Jeff Johns and amazing directors and such that allow you to kind of have more freedom. I was very lucky in particular with Stargirl because I was given a lot of freedom as an actor. There was a lot of choices I was just able, they allowed me to make. There were a lot of things I'd come and talk about, and they were just completely open to. So in that respect, Stargirl was a lot like making music in the sense of there was a lot of creative freedom, which isn't always the case, especially when you're still trying to make a name for yourself. And and that never really ends. I've been doing it for like 10 years, and you'll go from one set where they give you complete creative freedom to another set where they treat you like you've never been on a set before. So it really just depends. It's really hot or cold depending. But that is the one thing I love about music. I'd say a little more than acting is acting. You're always, most of the time, trying to fit within what people expect or what people want. And with music, you can kind of always do whatever you want, Yeah, so I'd say those are where the two kind of parallel each other, but at the same time veer off.
Right, and in terms of your music, would you say it falls into a particular genre or style, or is it more, you kind of explore more of a general kind of musical taste?
Yeah, I mean, for someone that likes the simplicity of genres, I always say, it's kind of modern pop-ish, but it also has a lot of elements of classic and soul style, R&B, a little bluesy. I was always heavily influenced from like Sinatra and the Rat Pack and Otis Redding and Sam Cooke. I mean, those are the artists I was listening to as a kid. I wasn't really listening to anybody relative to my generation. And only the past 5 to 6 years that I start opening up my palette to other music. But for a long time, I was heavily influenced from the classics. So I'd say it's a beautiful blend of then and now, with your sprinkle of modern pop on top.
Right, and you mentioned earlier, obviously Stargirl, and you've become widely known for playing Henry King Jr. Before you started playing Henry, what most excited you about bringing that character to life?
What excited me the most, it was two big things. The first thing was was the idea that it was up to me to kind of change the audience's opinion by the time Henry had run his course. So that was really exciting. Like knowing that I was playing such a jerk in the beginning that would soon become like the guy that breaks your heart at the end. That was so exciting for me because he just completely flips on your head what your expectations of him are in the beginning. And I've always loved that about characters and movies and TVs, like where they just do a 180 you don't expect. I love tricking the audience, and that had me really excited. And then also, the only other CGI work I like ever was a part of was Fear the Walking Dead, and it was very dismal. It was a very small amount of CGI. And so I was really excited to work with the telepathic powers. It was very daunting because I'd never done something like that. I mean, everything Henry does when he's using his powers is all like on set. None of it's practical. So you're never really seeing anything that's there. You all have to just like pretend. And I'd never done that before. I was really intrigued to get that down. But those were my top two. Those were like the big things that I was just like. And they all played out so perfectly. Like I was so happy with what happened, and also just again the freedom I was given, and you felt so comfortable on this set too. Like you never really felt like you were making mistakes as much as it was just like let's try this or let's try that. It was really, really cool.
Yeah, because even like what you were saying there with Henry, kind of the first impression is that he's one of those like meathead kind of like rude
Absolutely
characters, which. If you look in any kind of teen drama, you're going to find one of those.
At least.
And obviously, like you were saying, you did a great job of kind of subverting the expectation of what that character was going to be. Because his first line was that some crude comment to Yolanda or something, right? And
right.
You think, oh yeah, here we go. And then, I mean, you did a great job of that.
I appreciate that, and that's what was so funny, man. Is I remember talking to Jeff and just being like, I was like, "Are you sure people are gonna like him after this?" And he's like, "Don't worry." Mm-hmm. He goes, "I believe it." He's like, "I believe in you, and we're gonna make sure it's gonna be all right." Because I mean, that's such a strong introduction, That's such a staple of the pilot is just that first line there. And I was so worried. I was like, man, that's going to be really hard to get past that. But lucky enough, we did it. And what I also like is we did it without taking away from that message, Like, we didn't justify Henry's actions. We didn't say, like, what he did, like, he should be forgiven for what he did. all we said was that people can change, you know, which I always loved. They never like forgave Henry for what he said. It wasn't necessarily like, okay, like it's all right that you slut shamed. It's like they didn't say that. They just necessarily said that like he knows he was wrong and he's trying to get better. And I loved that message. I thought that was such a cool way to explain it.
Yeah, and actually, like in a weird kind of roundabout way, that kind of interaction with Yolanda almost kind of made her more likable, because obviously she was a bit kind of cold to Courtney in the beginning. People might think, oh well, you know, she's a bit rude, but then you kind of gave her a bit of sympathy, which could have maybe helped her out a bit, you know, so that, you know, in a weird kind of backward way, that kind of helped Yolanda out.
You're completely right. You're completely right.
Yeah. Yeah, and kind of on that same thing, like a defining part of Henry's appearance, his physical appearance, is the Letterman jacket. And I was wondering, in your real life, are you like any kind of a jock, or was that completely foreign to you?
Oh no, that was completely foreign to me. I was actually a pretty, I don't know what the right way to say this. I mean, I was like I'm just blunt with it. I was a fat kid growing up. Like, I mean, people say heavy set, people say whatever. All I know is when I was getting bullied, I was called fat. I wasn't called heavy set. I was just called fat. Like, I was a fat kid growing up for most of my life till I was like 14. And no, I was definitely not the good-looking jerkish jock guy. That was not who I was. That being said, I was always really outgoing. I was like I didn't have a problem being in the skin I was in, and I owe a lot of that to my parents, just because my parents were just completely blunt with me. You know, they're like, there are mean people in this world, and there's always going to be mean people in this world. And so you can either decide to take their words to heart, or you can understand that words have no value unless you give them value. And so I took that to heart, and, you know, I never really let it get to me, you know? I mean, when I was first younger, and you know, obviously you're getting older and you're trying to, like, understand the world, it was a little harder. But, you know, I never really let it affect me because of my parents' words. And that being said, I did have a strong family, you know, to go back to, and I had a good support system. But those words always kind of stuck with me, you know? That was always just, like, kind of like, you know, you give yourself value. People's words are empty unless you give them value. So yeah, but to answer your question, I definitely was not that jock guy. I don't know. I kind of shot out of it at 16. But that kid in me never really left. You know, I'm so thankful for those times in my life. I'd never take that back. You know. But yeah, no, I was not like Henry growing up, or even remotely close.
Right. So you said before in other interviews that you were aware of what would happen to Henry, like from pretty much the get-go, early on at least. So like, how did that knowledge? I mean, you kind of touched on it, but how did it affect how you played him? Because you think you would have done things differently if you'd assumed, oh well, he's probably going to be around for a while, if you didn't know what was coming?
Yeah, it's hard for me to say if I would have done things differently, but because I also just had the philosophy of, I never like to, funny enough, is I never like to know too far in advance where my character's going, because it's hard in general to keep up with, like, emotions and stuff when you also know what's happening in next week's episode. Like, how can you be affected by what's happening now if you know in next week's episode it's going to resolve or something? So I never like to get too far ahead in my character story anyways. And it was a really smart way, the way Jeff did it, because he kind of gave me breadcrumbs of my storyline, right? Like, he told me, he's like, you're going to help the JSA, you're going to fight your dad's going to kill you, you're going to realize you're Starman's nephew. Like, he told me all that, but he didn't tell me when it was going to happen or how it was going to happen, right? Which was really smart.
Right.
So I knew where Henry was going, but I had no idea how he was going to get there. And I think that helped a lot. I think if I would have known, like, exactly verbatim how it was going to happen, I definitely think it probably would have changed the performance a little bit, because it's like, how can you not, you know, have those thoughts floating in your head while you're performing? But the fact that it was so cryptic really helped me give Henry a fun journey. So yeah, I didn't know specifically that I was going to fight him after helping him, trying to remember who he was and stuff like that. I had no idea about that. Everything I knew was very, very linear.
Yeah, and the metaphor I kind of thought of the way you described it is almost like you had the first and maybe a bit about the last page of the story, but you didn't know what happened in the important bit in the middle. You needed to find it out as you went along.
Absolutely.
Similar kind of line.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I've spoken to Hunter Sansone in a previous interview, and I asked him at the time because he already lived, or his character Cameron lived in Blue Valley before Courtney got there. So what do you think Henry's relationships were like to the characters like Cameron or Rick or Beth? Because if it's like a small town, they're bound to have crossed paths at some point, I would think, right?
Well, yeah. Cameron and I, funny enough, we talked about that a lot because we're like, Rick and Henry are cut from the same strand, basically, in a lot of ways. And I'd like to think we both talked about how we probably had a friendship when we were younger and in middle school, and then just as we got older, things drifted apart, you know. But I actually, for the sake of character development, acted as if Henry knew everyone pretty well, you know. The whole fiasco in the cafeteria was just another day for Henry. Like I've looked at it like before Courtney showed up, Henry messed with these kids all the time. You know what I mean? Because you don't just build a hate for Henry like the kids had without a past of bullying and messing around and stuff. So I definitely think they had a past. And I definitely think in some ways it's why it was easy for them towards the end to kind of help each other in the tunnel and stuff. I always like to think that was kind of like a resurrection of old friendship in some ways between Rick and Henry. Because Cameron and I built this whole sort of story we had together, like that Henry and Rick had before things fell apart. Just for fun, but I definitely like to think it was an aspect of the characters.
Right, and it's interesting some of the wording that you use because Hunter basically almost says the exact opposite.
No kidding.
He's saying that he thinks he's saying that Cameron McKent doesn't know Henry really well, or Yolanda. You know, he's saying that he doesn't know any of them, and so that's kind of how he approached it. He's kind of like, you know, doesn't have many friends. He doesn't really know any of the other main characters. Like, oh, it's kind of, you know, you almost said the exact opposite. It's kind of really interesting.
Oh, yeah. Well, that makes sense too because I personally was referring to, and I mess this up all the time, but I was personally referring to Cameron Gelman and I were creating backstories for Rick and Henry.
Yeah. No, I got it.
Oh, you were saying.
Because I've spoken to Hunter who plays Cameron, but I haven't spoken to Cameron Gelman.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, he did the whole. I think it was really smart how he approached it because it makes sense for him to not have too much of a relationship. Because I remember when we were first talking about our characters, he's like heavy loner. You know, just didn't talk to anybody. Not on set, but obviously, but as his character, he like didn't talk to anyone really growing up, and I definitely think for the sake of Henry and Cameron, but that's what I mean. I mean, it's so crazy because the world is so open. I mean, and who knows the second season they could do flashbacks of everything. I mean, that's just me wishful thinking. That's not me confirming anything. That's just like you never know.
Yeah. I mean, like, it occurred to me at one point because of what, you know, you and Henry and Cameron McKent and, you know, like Joey Zarek, all your parents are in the ISA.
Mm-hmm.
So it would come across each other at some point, you know, or it's like if, you know, William Zarek was, you know, visiting Henry's dad and he kind of met, you know, all through those kind of lines.
Right. It's like, did we have family barbecues when we were younger that we don't remember? You know, like there's so many.
Yeah.
I know. We used to joke about that all the time.
Yeah, and actually another thing that Hunter told me was out of like those three male like teenage regular characters, he only auditioned for Cameron and not either of the other two. So was it the same experience for you, or did you audition for any other parts?
No, my experience was actually kind of a little bit of a roller coaster because I auditioned for Rick, and yeah, I auditioned for Rick at first, and his alias for the audition process was, his name was Ryan for the audition process, but I auditioned for Rick's character, and it was a great audition. Just like had a great time, and they called me and they're like, listen, we don't know if you're a right fit for Rick, but Jeff's writing a character with you in mind, so when that character's written out, we'll call you back in. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. And with most auditions, like, this is just kind of how the auditioning process works. You go in for something, and then sometimes you don't hear from it in like a month and a half, and next thing you know, you got it. You know what I mean? But so essentially, a month goes by, and I've about given up on it. You know, I'm like kind of focusing on some new projects, and I get a call, and they're like, hey, we're ready for you to come in for the other character. And so I come in for this next character, and his alias is called Charlie Gates. And I read the character, and some of the scenes are very similar to the scenes from the pilot in episode 2 with my dad and I. And I do that whole audition, and it goes great with them just because Rich Delia casting, I love them. They're sweethearts when it comes to just everything, the environment and auditioning and stuff. They really make you feel at home, which can't be said for a lot of casting. And so we do that audition, and it's another process of like I get a call like 3 days later, and they go, hey, look, they love it, we want to put you on hold. And I was like, okay, great, cool. And funny enough, because we were talking about how music and acting kind of always intertwines, funny enough, I was flying to New York in a few days to go meet with this label for Sony, and I planned this trip a month and a half before this audition. And Sony like was paying for it and everything. So I was very at their mercy. And I get a call, and this is how it always happens. I get a call, and they want to test me on the same day that I'm supposed to meet with Sony. And I'm like, look, guys, I can't ask Sony to buy another flight and book a different hotel. I was already so nice of them that they did that anyways. I'm like, I can't ask them to do that. And then on top of that, like, this happened, I booked this flight a month and a half ago. You know, this is way before you guys were even in my life. I was like, I can't just cancel on them to do this. And it was a big thing where, like, my reps and stuff were like, well, you know, you might be giving up a show if you don't do this. And I'm like, well, I guess I have to. Like, I like, just tell them I can't test, you know? And so I told them I couldn't test. I flew to New York. I did all that. And then I get back, and they just didn't test me. They're like, all right, you got it. You got it. We don't need to test you. And I was like, oh, wow. So it was kind of a roller coaster, man. It was like, it was really scary. I'd never done anything like that before. I've never like let go of a show, like, because I knew in my heart that there's no reason I couldn't do music and do the show at the same time, right? It just happened to be bad timing.
Yeah.
So I'm really thankful it worked out. And what was even funnier is, right before we signed the contract, though, like once they officially like, you got it, right before signing it, they wouldn't tell me who Henry was. They wouldn't tell me. All I knew was that he was a bully, right? That's all I knew. All I knew is he was a bully. They didn't tell me to like the extent of the character or how important he is. And I basically told my reps, because I just had gotten done doing a series where I already played a bully, and he was a cool character. He was much more than a bully. He had like a dark secret, and once that came out towards the end of the show, you like really understood who he was and stuff. Because I hate one-note characters. I don't like people that are just evil. I don't like people that are just nice, because that's just not how human beings work. We are not one-note. We're not a one-note species. So
exactly.
Yeah. So I was basically like, look, I don't know if I want to do this, because I've got to be honest, I love superheroes. I grew up with superheroes. It's been my life. Like, it's literally comics and video games have been my life. I was like, I do not want to be a part of a superhero show if I'm just playing a bully. I was like, I don't want to do it. You know, I was serious. I was like, I just don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And so we told them that. Like, I was like, tell them, like, if they're not going to tell me, then I just don't want to do it. And it wasn't one of these things where it's like, oh, tell them, like, I'm all big and bad. It wasn't like that. It was just like full transparency as an actor to a production. It's like, you know, I didn't want to get typecasted. I didn't want to, because this is a career. You don't want to get stuck playing the same type person all the time. And then Jeff reaches out and he goes, listen, please come to my office. Like, I really want to talk to you. Like, I want to let you know about the character. And obviously, I'm like, oh my god, yeah, meet with Jeff Johns? Are you kidding me? Let's do it. So I go to his office, and that's when he lays it all out for me. That's when he tells me who Henry really is, his powers, what he's going to become, yada yada yada. And then I shook his hand, and we basically like finished the deal right then and there. But yeah, it was a mega journey for me. It was like all over the place. But hey, the payoff was amazing.
Right, but as a comic book fan, then, just kind of going off what you're saying, did the name Brainwave mean anything to you, or is that a new kind of area of DC Comics you haven't heard of before?
Brainwave, I didn't necessarily. Well, actually, no, I didn't know about Junior. I didn't know about Brainwave Junior. I knew about the ISA and the JSA, right, but I didn't know about Junior. I didn't know about Brainwave Junior. I knew the like big head and the green cloak. I remember that through like my uncle and stuff because he was a big comic book guy and just having old comics and stuff. But I did not know about Brainwave Junior, which is really cool, and like it's very interesting as a comic book fan because you want to know everything, and so when you find a character you don't know about, it's even more intriguing, you know. And then I looked him up and just realized how badass he was. Like, he's so cool. And I mean, there's part of me that like there's part of me that was like, I wish I would have seen a costume, just because I would have loved to see how Stargirl would have made a Brainwave Junior costume. But at the same time, I also love how ridiculous it is to Henry. Like, I love how like he doesn't care. He's gonna go underground and use his powers and stuff. He doesn't need to like dress up. You know what I mean? So I always thought that was really funny, and I think it's so iconic, that like Dragon King fight where they're all dressed up and Henry's just throwing people around in his street clothes. I always loved that. It reminded me of like when Peter Parker fights the new Goblin in Spider-Man 3 and like his street clothes. There's also always something so cool about seeing heroes just fight in civilian clothing. I've always been a sucker for it. I love it. But yeah, no, I didn't really know too much about Brainwave Jr., but now I know his entire history.
Right. And other than Henry's arc in season 1, were there any other storylines you enjoyed following, like reading the script as you were going along, or watching it all play out on TV? Yeah,
I actually really thoroughly enjoyed Shiv's story and Shining Knight's story. I thought those three were like some super strong arcs. I think the arcs as a whole are really great, you know. There's just some things like, as a comic book fan, you read and like you get used to, you know what I mean? Like, I think Breck did a fantastic job with Courtney, but that story I've kind of heard before, you know what I mean? Being the chosen one and stuff, but they definitely flipped it on its head with their chemistry. I think Luke and Breck's chemistry was just amazing, and the way they went about it, I thought was really, really cool, because even if you've read the Stars and Stripes comics, it didn't play out exactly how the comics go, and I love that. I love how different that was. But as far as just like a fan from a third person perspective, you know, just a bird's eye view, I love Janitor Justin and Shiv's storyline. I just thought it was so sick, and then her introduction and his introduction, you know, it was just so good.
Yeah, I think it's actually really cool you mentioned Shining Knight, because I actually spoke to Mark the day after his episode came out.
Oh, he's the best.
Shining Knight episode. Yeah, lovely, lovely man. And also, obviously, fellow Brit. He's from Manchester.
Yeah.
I'm from down south. From his perspective, that was cool. And you mentioned Courtney just there, and obviously when Henry died, she kind of was saying, "Oh yeah, you know, we're cousins and all that."
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you think any kind of friendly dynamic could have developed if Henry had survived?
Well, I'd always like to think. I had kind of two perspectives in how this would go. There was part of me that's like, maybe Henry would have joined the JSA, but I also think it was a little too much for Henry. I guess that, like, to me, Henry is obviously, like, he has a slight more maturity to him than the rest of the team does, and that's not to say they lack maturity, but it's just like Henry's like arguably older, and the things he's focused on are I think a little different than the team. You know what I mean? Like, I always saw Henry, if the show kept going, would be kind of like, not an anti-hero, but would be kind of like someone that comes in and out of the team. Like when he needs to go do something to figure something out for himself, he's going to go do it. He's not going to, you know what I mean? He doesn't want to work with the team unless it maybe benefits him. And I don't mean that in like an arrogant way. I mean more like, I kind of saw, if Henry kept going, I kind of saw Courtney and Henry, because in the comics, Starman and Henry kind of go to the conscious realm to find his father. And or I think it's called the conscious realm, or some sort of realm where they go to find his father, and his father sacrifices himself to make Henry stronger and let Starman and him escape. I kind of saw like a story like that maybe happening, where Courtney and I go to find the actual Starman, and Henry, because now that Henry knows his mother was a hero, I feel like that would have been his next motive, is to try to find his mother, or learn about his mother, or learn about Starman. I didn't necessarily see him working with the JSA. And then in a different world, I thought maybe if Henry did survive, he would have worked with the JSA strictly to like get through to his dad, or to like get payback on his dad, to possibly kill his father. Like I could have saw that happening too, but you know, in another world.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the beginning it was kind of a question with Henry and all the other like ISA offspring, like which side would they go on? You know, it's kind of a question of what would happen. And I think it's just because of, you know, like I was saying, kind of like that typical kind of jockish character, people might have assumed, or he's going to be a villain. And, you know, obviously the turn he kind of made, as I was saying before, kind of subverted it. So that was very satisfying to watch as a viewer and all that.
Well, I also... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, one of my favorite parts on how they executed too is you never really knew like what his decision was going to be until the very end of that episode, until he like decides to fight back against his father. You know, there was never really full confirmation until that last talk they had. Like that last talk in the tunnel before he says like he killed his mother, because when he's like, join me, you really don't know. He might be like, you know what, screw it, I will join you. You don't know. And that's what I always loved, is they really saved it to that very end to prove the point that he was going to die a hero, which I was always like super fond of.
And even actually just to say that, obviously, you know, it's a testament to Christopher Baker in that one episode. He was kind of like, you know, confused and fragile and, you know, emotional, to then just have that slip, you know, but obviously he does probably one of the most unforgivable things someone could ever do.
Yeah.
You know, I'm pretty sure that was just in the one episode, wasn't it? It wasn't 2 episodes. It was literally, at the beginning he was in the hospital and he was kind of out of it, and then obviously at the end, well,
that's what's so heartbreaking about it. I mean, he tells him in the first 10 minutes of the episode, he's like, I'm going to train you, everything's going to be fine, and then the last 10 minutes of the episode, he's killing him. It's brutal.
Like that was part of the reason that kind of like, you know, the initial reaction I had was like, you know, oh my god, what a change of direction, obviously. But kind of moving away from Stargirl, according to IMDb, you have a role in 12 Mighty Orphans with Robert Duvall, Martin Sheen, and a familiar face in Luke Wilson. And how different were the experiences of working on Stargirl and 12 Mighty Orphans?
Definitely huge difference as far as scale. I mean, we were actually we had a very, very generous budget for 12 Mighty Orphans, considering it's somewhat of an independent film. But that being said, it's a feature. It's weird. It floats in that world of like it's you know, definitely big budget enough and some heavy hitters and strong enough script to be more than an independent, but it's not like officially like a huge it's hard to explain, but it's really it's one of those films where it's like it's basically Remember the Titans had a baby with Friday Night Lights, and it's based in 1939. It's an insane story. It's essentially about this team of straggly orphans and this coach Rusty Russell, who basically created the widespread offense. And it was really fun, specifically just because of how practical everything was. I mean, we were genuinely playing football in leather gear from like just years ago. It's the same gear they used for Leatherheads, yeah, and it was amazing. I mean, you're on set with Martin Sheen, and it was really great because Luke and I didn't get much time to work together on the show, but we were spending every day with each other on the movie. And it was really cool being able to finally like catch up about the show while shooting the movie. But yeah, it was definitely two night and day experiences. Just as far as like in the movie, you know, we're in the mud, we're in the heat, we're really working. I mean, we were really playing football. You know what I mean? It was very physically destroying, for lack of a better term. I loved the movie and the experience, but it ended me. It really took the life out of me. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean just like, you know, everyone really gave it their all to do that movie. And Stargirl was more of a luxury, I guess you would say. It was not to say it wasn't difficult at times, but Stargirl was, you know, just a two different type of sets, you know, two different type of experiences. But I was so beyond lucky and thankful to be able to do both.
For sure, and this is actually the last question I've got here, and obviously, you know, in the times we're living in, if you could say, like, if you could send a message to fans of Stargirl or Henry, or maybe just even you personally, what would you want to tell them?
Man, I want to tell them just like human to human, just take it easy on yourself. I think we live in this social media age where, I don't know, there's so much fakeness in social media, and there's just so much, you know, so much of people pretending to be what they're not, and it really affects people that live regular lives, you know? It's like social media just causes so many people to second guess themselves and break themselves down based on lives that we glorify. We glorify so many people that don't know what reality is, and I think that affects like real people. And so I guess my thing is like just enjoy being you and focus on yourself. And it's like, if you weren't productive this week or the week after or this whole year, like if you got by, if you lived, if you found times to smile and enjoy yourself, that's enough. You know, I feel like we're just putting way too much pressure on ourselves. And it's hard to escape. It's really hard to escape. And so my biggest goal is I just really hope people take it easy on themselves, you know, and cut themselves a break. I have to remind myself to do it all the time, just because we get way too caught up in the fallacies of what we look at every day when we wake up and scroll through these feeds and stuff. It's just not real life. And I just want people to give themselves the benefit of the doubt. I mean, that would be my message, honestly.
Right. And yeah, I mean, it's a great message to share. I think people right now, a lot of people are obviously struggling, and I think sending out messages like that, it could be really helpful to people who might come across this in any medium.
Yeah, self-care is so important. It really is, you know, just like and believing in yourself and truly cutting yourself a break. I mean, you gotta pat yourself on the back and just be proud of anything you've really done, you know.